Former President Donald Trump found guilty on all 34 counts.
It's a rigged trial, a disgrace.
What's next for sentencing, the campaign, and what else he said minutes after the jury's verdict in his criminal hush money case. Then local political experts weigh in, their comments and concerns about this historic verdict. Plus, from the Triangle to New York, reaction from both sides. Right now at 7, history made in a New York courtroom today. Former President Donald Trump becomes the first former U.S. president to be convicted of felony crimes. He was found guilty of all 34. This is for falsifying business records and a hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. Sentencing is set for July 11th. That could range anywhere from probation to 4 years in prison. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Ashley Rowe.
And I'm Dan Haggerty. Trump stopped to talk to the media before leaving the courthouse.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. But the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a so-respect DA and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man.
Let's begin our coverage tonight with Brett Neese, who's in the live centers. You've been covering this since the very moment the story broke this afternoon.
Yeah, Dan and Ashley, you just saw the former president's remarks after that verdict was read there in the courthouse. This is video of him when he got to Trump Tower after he left that courthouse, a convicted felon. I also have some video of what that motorcade looked like. He left the courthouse at around 5:50 this evening. It took about 30 minutes for him to get from the courthouse to Trump Tower. And when he got to Trump Tower, he waved to his supporters back here in the live center. You see him arriving here at Trump Tower. And he was speaking to his supporters, giving a bunch of waves to his supporters, raising his fists, as you see there. And then just a short while ago, we heard from the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg. Here's what he had to say.
And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors, by following the facts and the law and doing so without fear or favor.
And then in the just in the last few minutes, we did just learn from the former president that his team says that he will hold a press conference at 11 a.m. We only heard from him for about a minute in the courtroom after that verdict was read, but we will hear a full press conference from him tomorrow at 11 a.m.
All right, Brett, thank you so much. Now, it is important for us to get reaction here from people in the community, because that is going to be a big part of how Americans treat this moment moving forward. Our Aaron Thomas is live in Holly Springs with how people there are reacting to this news. Aaron.
Yeah, Dan, so we've been to a variety of parks. We've been to a park in Raleigh, and now we're here in Holly Springs. Getting some mixed reactions. Some people, they are being honest with us that they're exhausted with this ongoing political season. Others were pretty surprised when we shared with them that the former president has been convicted on those 34 counts, some of them finding out for it the first time. Now, one man who just finished up a bike ride, he's actually here still on scene. He shared how he thinks the former president will get off with an appeals ruling, but others criticize how a convicted felon cannot vote in this election but can still manage to run for president. Then I just finished speaking with one gentleman named Davin Daughtry, who lives here in Holly Springs. He shares how the criminal record holds no bearing and how he would vote in the general election.
When people get a criminal record and, you get caught in the system or whatever happens, they feel like their life is over. So that just shows this opportunity that you're able to still run and do something big as that.
Is that perspective you see there just kind of shows you how with the former President Trump having a criminal record now, some people feel like that could be used against him and them not wanting to vote for him. For others could see him as a martyr of sorts and would actually support him in that regard. Of course, North Carolina is a swing state, so all eyes are on how voters here will be voting come November. Back to you.
All right, Aaron, thank you. For more insight on the judicial perspective of this, we want to bring in former Superior Court Judge Carl Fox, joining us now live. Judge, thank you for being with us.
Certainly, it's a pleasure, Ashley.
Guilty on all counts. Were you surprised to see that?
No, I was not surprised. I knew a lot of people who were thinking he was not going to be convicted. I don't know if my wife even believed he was going to be convicted, but I was pretty sure that he was going to be convicted of these crimes.
What made you so confident of that?
Well, you have to think of it in these terms. The case is sort of like a triangle. You've got Donald Trump at the top. You have Stormy Daniels on one side. You have Michael Cohen on the other. Now, independently, those two have no connection except with Donald Trump. So Stormy Daniels is connected to Donald Trump because she says she slept with him. And then Michael Cohen is connected to Trump because he's his, quote, fixer, unquote. So the only reason for those two to know each other or to come together is over this payment that Michael Cohen says he made of $130,000. And it doesn't make sense that he would make this up and then have to have this other person woven into it independently that he didn't know. And it doesn't make sense that he would go out and borrow $130,000 to make this payment to her if it wasn't for Donald Trump. He has no reason to do that. And he's married, and I can't imagine him going and explaining to his wife he borrowed $130,000 to pay a porn star. That would not be something that would go over very well.
All right, let's look to July 11th now. Trump's conduct was an issue with Judge Merchan throughout the trial. He was even found in contempt of court. As we look towards sentencing, how will this factor in?
Well, yeah, his conduct has been abhorrent. It has been absolutely the worst possible conduct. It's literally contemptuous of court the way he has behaved. Even after the trial, he's called this a rigged trial, a crooked judge. He's criticized everyone associated with it. And his view of it is he's the only one that's right and knows the truth. And as a judge and as a former judge and as a former prosecutor, I have seen defendants take that tact of everybody's lying but me. And it absolutely seldom works. And in this case, it didn't work. And he said he was going to testify in this case again and again and again, and he didn't. And that isn't surprising because he would have been subjected to rigorous cross-examination, and he wouldn't have known who the state might ask him about while he was on the witness stand. So he made a wise decision not testifying in this case.
Mm-hmm. But just really quick, how will his conduct play into sentencing?
Well, yeah, the judge has forgiven a lot here. Any regular Joe or regular Jane would have been locked up in jail for this trial based upon what he said about this judge and about this trial. How much it plays in, it's hard to say because he has no criminal record. And so that's a major factor. But the question is, how do you punish someone for trying to literally rig an election and change the narrative on an election? And that isn't something that should be just a probationary sentence. So I would expect him to receive some active sentence in this case, but I wouldn't be surprised if he received a probationary sentence because of his lack of record, even though his behavior is terrible.
All right. I appreciate your insights here. Thank you so much, Judge.
We continue
You're welcome.
We continue to get more reaction here. We've heard from some voters here in North Carolina. We're also hearing from political leaders and lawmakers. With that, we want to go live now to Washington in D.C. to NBC's Alice Barr, who is tracking that part of the story for us. Alice.
Dan, and there has been a whole lot of reaction flowing in from Capitol Hill. Let's start over with the man who is going to take on former President Trump in the November election. The Biden campaign came out today and said that this conviction shows that no one is above the law, and then quickly pivoted to saying that really the only way to guarantee, aside from this conviction, putting this aside, the only way to guarantee that former President Trump will not be back in the Oval Office is at the ballot box. So they're actually kind of echoing the Biden campaign campaign what we heard from Mr. Trump when he stepped out of the courtroom and he said that the real verdict will come on November 5th from the people. Both sides really pointing to the fact that former President Trump has now been convicted of these 34 felony counts does not mean that he cannot run for president or hold the office. So there's what's happening on the legal front and there's what's happening on the political front. Aside from the Biden campaign, we have heard from House Speaker Mike Johnson calling this a shameful day, saying this was all a political exercise and not a legal one. And then from both of your Republican senators there in North Carolina, Senator Ted Budd said simply on X, today's verdict is a total disgrace. And Senator Tom Tillis said, I am shocked by the verdict, considering that this case should never have been brought forward, again calling it politically motivated. On the Democratic side, from Congresswoman Deborah Ross, who represents part of Raleigh, she said, quote, this is how our legal system is supposed to function. A jury of his peers deliberated the facts and came to this unanimous decision. The bottom line is that no one is above the law. So this is for sure going to be central on the campaign trail moving ahead. We know the sentencing is set for July 11th. Just 4 days after that is the Republican National Convention. It's going to be really difficult to kind of divorce these two seismic events, the conviction of the former president and presumptive Republican nominee, from this election that is in full swing.
In general, it does seem that a lot of the opinions on this verdict seem to be separated by party lines. Take us into Washington, D.C. here for a moment, Allison. It wasn't clear how people would react to this verdict, regardless of what it was. What types of precautions were taken at the Capitol? What was the attitude there leading up to the ultimate guilty verdicts today?
We do know that police forces here in the Washington area have been mobilized. Certainly after what we saw on January 6th, we've known that there have been different levels of precaution, different reinforced plans that have been put into place. So everyone was going to be prepared for what comes out. And I think there's still time ahead to see how this all plays out, what the actual reaction is sort of in the streets. It takes a little while for this kind of news to percolate. We've seen a lot of very active response outside the courtroom itself, but sort of waiting for that to trickle out here in Washington. We can speak, though, a little bit to polling, because that's a big part of this picture as well. There's been some new polling numbers that have just come out today that came out, of course, before the verdict, we should note, but just within the course of the time that the trial's been ongoing. And you're seeing that for the most part, people really do stand where they stand. And a majority of people have said that whatever the verdict was going to be, it wouldn't change their opinions. But in a couple of different polls, there was either 11% or 25% of independent voters who did say they might be less likely to vote for former President Trump if he were convicted. And we're talking about such narrow margins that it may come down to that small number of people that could be very decisive in the election.
Absolutely. Alice Barr in Washington, D.C. Alice, thank you. And you can stay with WRAL to be on top of these developments throughout the evening, online, of course, and during our late newscast at 10 o'clock on Fox 50 and 11 on WRAL.
Still to come, one school system in our area is rushing to get more security on campus.